It is the weekend of July 20th, 1923. A convention of the National Women's Party is gathered in Seneca Falls, New York. It is the 75th anniversary of the first Women's Rights Convention, which had met in this same town in 1848. The convention's primary business is to consider a proposed constitutional amendment that reads, "Men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States and every place subject to its jurisdiction." Alice Paul, author of the amendment, introduces it to the delegates.
"We shall not be safe until the principle of equal rights is written into the framework of our government."
Delegates endorse the amendment unanimously and launch an immediate campaign to ratify it. That fall, the amendment is introduced in Congress for the first time, and then reintroduced nearly every year until finally receiving congressional approval in 1972. Many early opponents of an equal rights amendment feared it would jeopardize special protective legislation for women. Later opponents would maintain that there was no need to change the Constitution. They argued that equality of status for women could be secured by new laws and court decisions. In fact, starting in the 1960s, legislation and Supreme Court decisions began chipping away at the discrimination women faced in the job market. Yet many women, as well as men, believed that still more needed to be done. Laws could be changed and court decisions could be overturned. They wanted a constitutional amendment declaring that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress finally agreed. In March 1972, the U.S. Senate joined the House of Representatives in approving the Equal Rights Amendment. Just 32 minutes after the Senate vote was announced, Hawaii became the first state to approve the amendment. The record pace continued. Delaware, Nebraska, and New Hampshire ratified the following day. Within a year, 24 more states ratified it, either unanimously or by large majorities. Early public opinion polls showed overwhelming support for the idea that men and women should be fully equal before the law. But then, a determined group of opponents emerged and mobilized. The momentum for the amendment slowed and eventually stalled. By 1977, 35 states had ratified, but 3 more were needed. The Equal Rights Amendment was caught up in one of the fiercest constitutional battles in the nation's history. What began as a debate over the constitutional merits of the amendment expanded into a heated clash of beliefs about the identity of women and their proper role in society. Both opponents and supporters employed a wide range of tactics, from legislative lobbying to civil disobedience.
We could only begin to do something about it when we organized. We had to organize our own groups, our own organizations, and we had to organize them about facing our own conditions.
The struggle also generated new questions about the amending process. Does Congress have a right to impose a time limit on ratification? Can a state change its mind and rescind its earlier action on an amendment? In response to lobbying by the National Organization for Women and other supporters, Congress eventually agreed to extend by 3 years the 7-year deadline for ratification.
Good evening. Yesterday they marched, today they lobbied as proponents of the Equal Rights Amendment launched a last-ditch effort to buy more time from Congress to get the amendment ratified. Their message is that another 7 years is necessary to get the required ratification by 3/5 of the state legislatures, that the complexities and misunderstandings surrounding the amendment demand that extra time. The other side says it's an unfair changing of the rules in midstream, that any extension would be illegal and unconstitutional.
Illinois, which had long been a key battleground, remained one of the few last hopes for the ERA. In the weeks before the deadline, women protesters began a hunger strike, chained themselves in the state Capitol building, and invaded its House of Representatives in an effort to force a vote. But these desperate last-minute tactics failed.
Good evening. The Equal Rights Amendment officially dies at midnight tonight when the time for its ratification expires. Despite desperate last-ditch efforts, from hunger strikes to sit-ins, ERA ended 3 states short of the number required to amend the Constitution. In Washington and other cities today, the winners celebrated while the losers threatened to rise again.
one of the most colorful, hard-fought ratification battles in U.S. history came to an end. The battle over the Equal Rights Amendment raised fundamental questions about the Constitution's amendment process. After a long and bitter campaign, an amendment with strong public support failed. Some have charged that this failure reveals a fundamental weakness in the Constitution because the will of a majority of the people was not honored. Others maintain that the framers acted wisely in making sure the Constitution could only be changed by the consensus of a supermajority.